All right, Melissa, take one.
Well, my name is Melissa Vartanian, and I'm the managing director here at Milwaukee Rep. My relationship with Hunzinger goes back quite a few years. I worked at this institution several years, a couple decades, and my experience with John first started with him being on our board of trustees. So he's been an avid supporter of Milwaukee Rep throughout the years as a patron and a supporter, and then served on our board of trustees for a little bit. And then during, I think it was around 2014-ish, we had experienced that phenomenon that everyone was experiencing here on the river downtown in Milwaukee, where our building was sinking into the river. And John Hunzinger and his team at Hunzinger Construction were key in helping us put a team together to rectify some of the issues that were going on with those subsurface pilings that were causing us problems. That was sort of our first experience working with him in that capacity. And then I think it was about 2017, John, who was an avid theater goer here at Milwaukee Rep, had some suggestions for us for our Stackner Cabaret, and sort of how we might be able to increase capacity, and how we were challenged with the way that our setup was in there, the way that it had been designed, with the bar being separate from the dining room. And he thought that there was room and potential to do some work in there. So we explored that opportunity and brought him and his team on to be our contract manager and construction manager on that project. And that was sort of our first toe dip into the major construction and renovations of our building here at Milwaukee Rep. They pulled off a massive feat of renovating that space in about 3 months during the summer, during our downtime. And once that was complete, we determined that we felt it was necessary to start doing a study here of the remainder of our building, and look at perhaps maybe phasing that in and doing one space at a time. So throughout that process, we kept John engaged. We ended up doing some studies on the building and what could be done with some theatrical consultants. And then our board of trustees decided to make upgrading and updating this building a strategic priority in 2019. And then we were going to begin, some real investigation and some real work into what that would be. But then COVID hit in 2020 and forced us to pause and halt our process, because theaters and all the entertainment venues and all the venues in downtown Milwaukee were shuttered at that time. And that's when John stepped in with his team to really help us in a different way. So our experience with them on that process was they worked with us to help us figure out how to reopen our building. So as everyone can kind of remember and imagine, that we did, try to push it to the back of our minds, there was a lot that had to be done with the HVAC to ensure that air changes were maximized, and that patrons that were coming into our building, as well as our actors on stage, that everyone felt safe and felt like they had clean air and that they could be in spaces together during that time when there were still so many questions about what was going on with COVID. And John put together a team of folks from Hunzinger Construction that worked with us, and then worked with us to involve other experts and get feedback. And his team participated in live web panels that we did and provided information to the community. And we really got to experience them as a partner and a collaborator in getting the building back open. And then once we were back open, we really decided to dive into the building updates that we needed to do. We had originally thought of taking our building down for about 18 months. And then what happened was that with the result of COVID shuttering us, our board, our patrons, no one had the appetite anymore for the idea of us shutting down. So now we had to rethink how we were going to do this building and if it could be phased. And John was convinced that it could be, and that his team would be able to pull it off and allow us to keep some of the venues open and keep working here while taking some of the venues down, so that we could phase this in and get the job done that we needed to do. And so that was sort of the process of us getting to where we were prior to construction, and we had a really incredible experience with him and his team as partners to get this project started. I think what's really phenomenal is to see how collaboratively his team works together and works with the other members of the construction team and the design team. So the way that they collaborate with the architects, with the engineers, with our own staff, to really understand how we do business and what we need in order to operate. I mean, I think that there's a million ways that you can approach a problem or come up with a solution, but they really do try to understand how operationally and logistically things need to work out. And I think they're great at doing that. They also were really great at trying to figure out how to keep this in budget. And I know that sounds like something that, of course, anybody is going to do. You know, if you have a GC, they're gonna try and make sure that they can do this on time and on budget. But Hunzinger truly understood that we are a nonprofit and that we didn't have the luxury of overspending. And also, we didn't have the luxury of delaying or changing our opening date. We're a theater, and as everyone knows the cliche, the show must go on, we had a date in which we needed to open, and that was immovable. So when challenges would arise, and they did, they were really great at trying to figure out how to resequence and recalibrate and make sure that they could find a way to help us continue to stay on target. And I think that they were phenomenal at that. I think that additionally, when we talk about the investment that his team made in this process, and I think that it's probably something you might see with a lot of GCs out there, but the team that he put together, and I know he handpicked the team to make sure that they could collaborate well with us, and they were really great communicators. I think, you know, we're in theater, and our art form is a collaborative process. So as we're trying to create something on the stage, we go through a process of design and engineering and budgeting, and then we go through a process of working out logistics and figuring out how to rehearse it and bringing all those partners together in order to make the final product. And this was very much like that as well. His team didn't shut off at a certain time. You know, when their day was done here, it wasn't done. So we'd get, you know, there was late night emails, and we're up late, we're working on theater, you know, we're in technical rehearsals, or we're doing performances, so we're all at our computers or checking our email at our fingertips. And it was incredible to see that his team was invested in that way too. So even if they had an early morning and there was something that they needed to get back to us on, I was getting emails in the middle of the night. Not that I want to encourage that sort of, you know, that over commitment to doing it at risk of yourself, but they did that because they cared, and they knew that getting us answers and getting decisions made in a timely fashion was paramount in order to get the project done on time. And there were a lot of things that had to happen in a certain order, and timelines were tight. So to see his team really dive in and be committed in that way was really exceptional. I think that, well, one, they truly do care. The team is invested. They take pride in the work that they're doing, and they want to make sure that they're doing the best work that they can. They're not trying to cut corners. They're really digging in. They're pushing for the best quality work out of all the subcontractors, and everyone's delivering it, and they're delivering it with great attitudes and smiles. And I know that, you know, you walk those sites, and folks that maybe when owners are walking the sites, there's a different mentality, but we were on site. We were working alongside these folks day in, day out while we were occupying the space that they were actually building. And to see everyone really with such respectful work ethic and professionalism, and even if they were having a hard day, being able to have a conversation with folks as we were walking through the building. Everyone was really invested and excited about the project that was being worked on. And even on those tough days when everyone was tired and working really hard, people brought their best energy to it. And they were human beings, and they were able to we were all able to connect with each other on granular levels. So I think that was great. Additionally, I think that the Hunzinger team also takes great pride in making sure that they have a safe workplace. And they did not cut any corners on safety, and that was apparent. And we were bringing patrons through, we were bringing donors through. We had a handful of different donor tours that we did throughout this process at various levels and various stages of the project, where we have demolition and we have things that are on site that are not safe. His team, not only did they accompany us and escort us and be with us on those tours and help provide feedback and insight to our patrons, they also were there to help determine the pathway, and it would change whatever week we were doing this or whatever day we were doing this, and sometimes we were doing them a couple days apart, and they were ready to collaborate on the pathways that we could take to keep everyone safe, not only those that are visiting the site, but those that were working here on the site, and we appreciated that as well. One of the things that I would say about Hunzinger's team is that this building was an existing building, right? It was over 130 years old and had a lot of unforeseens, right? So during the process, as much as we could beforehand, they went above and beyond to try and gather as much information as they could about this building alongside the architects and engineers to understand how it was originally built. But there were a lot of things that were not able to be determined, drawings didn't exist, or we're gonna need exploratory measures that they couldn't do until after we were already out of the space. So in some of those areas, they had to wait to do that process right as they were starting demolition. That left an opportunity for a lot of challenges to arise. And they did. There were unforeseen circumstances. There were things that they had anticipated or hoped for or maybe presumed would exist within the foundations. And then as they did that exploratory work, while they're in demolition and while they're trying to make sure that they're staying on target, they would identify that those elements weren't exactly what they had hoped for and that they were going to have to pivot. And they were, one, excellent at determining that they had to pivot if it had to happen, and then engaging all the right team members to quickly decide, determine, and engineer a solution that was a good alternative. And while they were doing that, they didn't want to lose time. So also really masterful at resequencing. And I think that has a lot to do with some of the key team members that were on this. So our superintendent, Dan Von Ruden, John Jansen, Matt Janicki, Megan DeGroot, John Sheehan, that team of folks, I'm sure there are lots of others that I'm not mentioning, they really came together and they engaged the architects that we had at EUA and our other consultants and engineers in the project to work together to find solutions and what could they keep going on so that they didn't lose traction or time during that process. That was really excellent to see, and also instilled confidence in us, because when those challenges arose, our hearts are kind of fluttering, we're getting heartburn, and we're like, all right, what do we do? How are we going to do this? Is this going to stay on time? And there were moments where things were paused and we felt like we were never going to get back on track, but we were, because they were behind the scenes continuing to push forward on elements wherever they could to make sure that process kept going and that we didn't have delays at the end. I think that they were also really great at leaving some space for some of our operational considerations. So as we were going through the process, they don't necessarily know how we function on a day-to-day, but they were invested in trying to understand it. So they got to witness it firsthand because we were still operating 2 of our theater spaces when we started this process. So they got to see logistically how we needed to load a show in and bring some things in from offsite and get it in certain elevators and figure that out, and then get it into the space. And so during that process, as we were running our shows and also had a live construction site going on, we would have some of those like aha moments, I'll say, where we would realize in the middle of it that, oh, this might be a challenge going forward, just for the way that we just had to do that. Will this be a challenge going forward? And we would dig in and we talk about how operationally we needed to function in the future. And then they would go through and investigate that with us. And they'd put RFIs together and they would help us determine what we needed to do to solve problems that we were anticipating might happen in the future. And I think that was also something that came from them really getting to know us as a client and really understanding what our issues were. And if they didn't understand, asking more questions so that they could get a better understanding, so that they could try to dig in and help us problem solve. And they were great team members on that too.